All right, you guys. So in this recording, what I want to do is cover customizable roofs. And this is really kind of the beginning or the transition from in this course, where we're going to be going from just kind of a more traditional construction or more traditional building to a more kind of design-centric use of the program. Now, Revit gets a lot of how do I say this? It gets a lot of, it gets a bad rep that Revit is too kind of orthographic, 90-degree walls, very traditional in its ability to model, right? And so what I want to do is spend the second half of this class kind of to begin to use Revit as a design tool, as opposed to just kind of a fabrication tool or a tool that is used to produce construction drawings in a real world environment. That's kind of what the first half was about. Now we're going to jump into more of the customizing tools to use as a design project, or to be using for a design project. Revit as a tool to use for your design studio courses that most of you guys might be taking. And so this course is really, or this lecture here, customizable roofs, is really kind of the beginning aspect to that. Now, I'm covering roofs right now, which might seem like a bit odd, because you might say, well, Javier, we don't really have a building yet. But we're going to be doing a new assignment in the following week, and that already kind of has a preset style or preset roof to it. And so before we jump into that, I wanted to take a moment and talk about more complex roofs or other ways of doing creating roofs. And so that's what this lecture is going to be about today. Now, the assignment associated to this lecture is essentially going to be to complete these to complete 3 roofs. So I'm going to show you guys how to do 3 different roof styles, or 3 different approaches to creating a customizable roof. And so the assignment is going to be for you to also complete 3 roofs in the same, using the same tools, or in the same kind of system or structure that or process that I'm using. However, your roofs do not have to look like the ones I'm producing. So you just have to kind of use the same tools, right? So it's kind of a long lecture, so I'm going to jump right into it. So the first one I want to do is the roof that I get asked about the most, right? Which is this really kind of, how do we do a really crazy, curvy looking roof? So I'm going to start off by just creating my walls. I'm also going to start kind of using and showing more tricks or kind of faster ways of producing things. So I'm going to go to my exterior wood siding and wood stud. And by the way, I'm using a residential template, the same one that we were using for the other project. I'm going to change my location line. For this, it really doesn't matter to me. Finish face exterior, simply because I don't really care much about the shape of the building. I'm just going to be doing a rectangle. I'm going to change my top constraint to go up to level roof. Okay, and I'm just going to use a rectangle, and I'm just going to create a wall just like that, or a set of walls using the rectangle tool. I'm going to go into the 3D view so we can take a good look at this. And I'm going to change my setting to shaded so that I can see some colors. First floor. And I also am going to want to go to my roof level. So I'm going to pull, I have my first floor, I have my roof plan, and my 3D. Now my roof plan doesn't show anything. And that has to do with the fact that, again, if I go to my elevations, remember that roof plans, or any plan, is taken 4 feet above the level line. So when I click on roof plan, it's actually being taken from 4 feet from here, 4 feet above my roof line, looking down. And since nothing is cutting through 4 feet above the roof line, I don't see anything. But what I can do is bring the underlays. So I'm going to scroll down here in the bottom left, sorry, on the left-hand side in the properties box. I'm going to find this underlay. Okay, and the underlay is going to essentially just bring other floor plans or other drawings into, it's actually all just plan view, so it's safe to say other plans into this view, but it's going to come in as a ghosted image. So it's really just there for reference. So I'm going to click inside here, click on this pull down, and I'm just going to select first floor and apply. And so this is what I mean, is that it shows the first floor as an underlay. I can't select it. If I click, 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 nothing happens. If I do a cross window, nothing is selected. So it's simply there just as just for reference. Okay. Now the tools we're going to be using, I'm going to do 2 roofs using the in-place massing tools, and then another one using the roof by extrusion tool. Okay. Now, this is going to be the first time that we're going to talk about in-place massings. But it's definitely not going to be the last. We're going to be talking, there'll be a couple more lectures on in-place massings. But essentially, an in-place mass is kind of taking, it's kind of taking Revit into sketch mode, right? Sketch mode is something we're familiar with. That's where we can create something without actually affecting the model in a live way, during kind of during a live session. So doing the in-place massing takes us into sketch mode, and it allows us to model something using just geometric shapes and forms, right? Up until now, everything has been pre-assigned. If we wanted a wall, we go to walls. We want doors, we go to doors. Components, windows, roofs, ceiling, floors, right? These are all these are all elements that are predefined in a lot of ways. We could go in there and change them, but a roof is a roof, a floor is a floor in Revit. When we go into in-place massings, it's just a block, right? And we get to design and we get to shape this block however we want to, and then we get to import it, or we get to bring it into the actual model itself, right? So I'm going to go into massing and site, into the massing and site tab. Okay. And by default, show massing is turned off. Okay, so we could either click on show massing so that it'll actually show the massings, because we're going to do an in-place mass, so we want to be able to see it. If you don't, though, you'll just get a warning. So I'm going to click on in-place mass, and I get a warning saying, hey, we have to turn show mass on. We have to turn that, we have to enable it. So it'll enable it by itself. So you actually technically don't have to. So we're just going to hit close. And it's going to ask us to name this first mass. So I'm going to call this roof 1. I'm going to select OK. I'm on the roof plan. Now, when we're creating when we're creating any in-place mass, we need to set a work plane. And so a work plane is essentially a sheet of paper, right? That we specify the height and the level at. So it's just like a floor plan, right? The floor plan has a work plane set at 4 feet, right? I just finished talking about all of the plan views are 4 feet above the level line. So, second floor drawings already by default has a work plane set 4 feet above the second floor. Roof plan, same thing. However, when you're using the in-place mass tools, you actually have to define and set the work plane, okay? Because it's not going to know which level to actually create this onto. And then on top of that, we could begin to create work planes on top of certain objects, as opposed to attach them and have them tied to level lines. So let me go ahead and set this first work plane. So I'm going to click on set work plane, and we're going to be doing this quite a bit. So I think by just by an example, and as I keep showing it to you guys, hopefully you begin to pick up the idea behind the work planes. So for right now, I'm going to set the work plane and set it to level roof. When I click on this pull down, it's saying, I could select first floor, second floor. So I could essentially draw something on the first floor, even though I'm on my roof plant level. Okay. But that's not what I want. I want to set it on my roof. I'm going to hit OK. Now, if you want to hit show, you can, and it just shows you the work plane. Now, what I'm going to do here, actually, let's take off show. What I'm going to do is use this spline through points. Okay, there's two splines. There's the spline and then spline through points. I'm going to select spline through points, and I want to use a reference line. Okay, so I should click reference line or reference first, and then spline. Okay, so reference is an imaginary line. Okay, imaginary in the sense that it's not a real thing within Revit, the way a model line would be. A model line is an actual line, and we would see it in all of our views if we were going to go onto a 3D view or sections or elevations. We would actually see this model line. Reference lines, we don't see, right? We can select them and we can manipulate it, but once we're done manipulating it, they kind of go invisible, right? And when we go into sections, elevations, or whenever we print this, it's not going to show up in anything. So we're going to select a reference. We're going to select spline through points. And then I want to draw on the work plane. Okay. So I'll click draw on work plane. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click, and I'm going to click 4 points. I'm going to create 4 points. And I'm going to kind of create them in a line. Okay. It doesn't have to be an exact straight line, but we want to get relatively close. I'm going to hit the escape key, and that's going to finish that. And then I'm going to come up here and start again. What I'm trying to do here is just kind of line them up to the other points from the other spline. And I'm going to do another one just like that. Okay. So now I have my 3. I'll hit the escape key twice to get out of the spline tool. Now I have my 3 reference points. Okay. I could select this. I could click and drag and move this if I want to a little bit more. And this is going to represent kind of the outer boundaries of my roof. So if you're going to want your roof farther out to have a larger overhang, then you might want to consider moving this out or moving it closer in or extending some of these and so on. Okay. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the 3D view, and then I'm going to select all 3 of these splines. Now, when I select all 3, I click on one and then I hit the control key. Notice that when I hit the control key, you see the little plus sign on next to the cursor. That's going to allow me to select multiple objects. If I hit the shift key, then I get the minus. So that's going to deselect certain objects, right? Control allows me to select multiple objects. So I'm going to select all 3 reference points or reference lines. And then this is where the magic happens. Right here where it says create form, I click on this pull down and we have the ability to create a solid form and create a void form. Okay. I'm going to create a solid form. Before I do that, what that's going to do is essentially use these points to create a surface. Okay. So I'm going to hit solid form, and there we now have a surface. So I could orbit around. Now it's a flat surface because we drew these points on a reference plane, on a work plane on the roof plan. So we drew it all on a flat surface. So that's why the roof itself is, or this surface, I don't want to call it a roof yet. The surface itself is flat, okay? But now what we have is points that we could begin to manipulate. So I could select this point. Okay. And when I click on this point, I'm going to get 3 arrows. I'm going to get a blue, a green, and a red. Okay. And then I'm also going to get these little triangle or these small arrows. So what these arrows, let's talk about the bigger ones, the longer ones. What these arrows represent is allowing me, or they're kind of using the move tool in a 3D view, in a 3D way, where it ensures that we're moving the points along the blue, the green, or the red axes. Okay, that's important because it's difficult to get a sense of depth in a 3D realm, in a 3D kind of model, because we lose the sense of depth. So it might look like I'm going up, but it might actually, in fact, be going backwards, right? So because of that, Revit gives us these guides, these arrows, so that we can go ahead and just click on one and drag, and we can ensure that it's moving up or down, or to the green or to the right. I'm sorry, to the green or to the red. We also have these, and these move at a diagonal. Okay, so they'll move at a 45 degrees. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to mess up what I have here. But for this assignment, or for this example, I'm really just going to be playing around with the blue axis. So I'm going to be moving these guys up and down. And as I do that, you begin to see this surface deform. So maybe I take this guy up a little bit. I can move it along the green. So if I want to bring it forward, okay. And what we're going to do is create a roof surface. So create a surface, and we're going to then tell Revit that that's my roof. Okay, so maybe I bring this part up a little bit, and maybe this point comes down, and maybe this point comes way down. Right, maybe we bring it all the way down to the floor. And I'm beginning to like that. Maybe we do the same thing over here. And then maybe we take this point, maybe we can bring it back a little bit. And I think this point's a little too low. We got to adjust this side over here. So let me go ahead and select this and bring this down. And bring this up a little bit. Bring this down a little bit. There we go. Maybe that's the form. You know what? Maybe this needs to come up a little bit more, I think. And maybe that's the form of my roof. I'm okay with that. Okay. So now I have my surface. We could also change the visual style. And I think consistent color gives you this bluish tint, which makes it a little bit easier to see and understand. Right. So we could take a look at this. I'm going to go actually to the south elevation really quick, just to make sure that these points are in fact where they need to be. Yeah, so these are touching the floor, or touching this level here. You know what we're not playing around with is bringing these guys out. So let's play with that a little bit. What if I take this? Yeah, let me move this. I'm gonna bring this point out. And these also have the temporary dimensions. So I can say, you know what, I want to bring this part out 8 feet. And I'll do the same thing over here on this one then. I'll make this 8 feet. So now this is also bowing outward as well. So now this is some crazy roof. So let's say I'm done. Okay, now the one thing about in-place masking is that it becomes really, really difficult to manipulate and adjust after you finish the mask. Okay, so before we hit finish mask, you want to make sure that it is in fact what you want. Because if you hit finish mask and then afterwards say, you know what, I need to make that change, you pretty much have to start over from scratch again. Okay, so when you do this, you want to make sure that it's set, that it is what you want. And so I'm going to go ahead and say finish mask. I always tend to get this warning. Just go ahead and ignore that. Okay, so now I have this mass. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is go up to the architecture tab and click on roof and click on this pull down. And up until now, we've been using the roof by footprint, right? Where we specify the slope and it gives us this very traditional looking roof, okay? We also have roof by extrusion, which is something I'm going to cover after this. And then we have roof by face, and that's what we have here. We have a surface, which is a face. So I'm going to click roof by face. I'm going to specify my roof. And I'm going to start off with the wood rafter 8-inch. Okay, you want to go as small or as thin as possible when you're doing something really crazy like this, because the thicker the roof gets, the more likely you're going to begin to have geometry running into itself. And once you begin to do that, right, geometry, yeah, it's kind of hard to show here, but it could be at where it dips down right in the center here. Where it dips down, it could be that in that dip, you have a portion of the roof, and just trying to create that curvature, when Revit tries to create that curvature, it begins to have geometry running into itself. And when Revit does that, then that's when you get error signs, right? And that typically happens when the roof is too thick. So we're going to start off with just a wood rafter 8-inch. Okay. And then we're going to select the surface and then select create roof. Let's see, I'm getting can't make roof. So let's go ahead and cancel this. Let's try to go with a 6-inch. So let's edit this type. We're going to duplicate this. Let's call this 6-inch. We'll hit OK. And we have to make it thinner. So we're going to edit this, and this roof here, we're going to go with 5 1/4. Okay. And what I'm looking at here is the total thickness. Okay. So now I changed the structure to 5 1/4. I'll hit OK, hit OK. So now let's try it. We'll select this and create roof. And of course, it's not allowing me to do that. So let me go ahead and cancel this. I think what's going on then is that we are in fact going, or this object is in fact too thin or too curvaceous, too complex to be at 6-inch, or to have a 6-inch thick roof. So let's go ahead in these situations. Let's go just to a generic 12-inch then. And I'm going to edit the type, duplicate it, and I'm going to go really thin on this one. Let's go with 2 inches. And then we kind of begin to build it up to see what the actual limit is. So I'll hit OK. I'll go to edit and turn this into 0 and 2. Now I know I'm kind of, let me hit OK. I know we haven't covered the actual structure of material, of elements. So the structure of a roof, the structure of a wall, the structure of a floor, things like that. And I know I've been kind of coming in here really quickly without really talking about it. There is a lecture that I'm going to be issuing in about a week or two, where it really dives into the structure aspect in this. The structure aspect in the construction of these objects, because that is a whole other lecture in of itself. So anyways, when I'm making these changes, I'm just going to structure, edit, and adjusting the thickness right inside here of that structure. So I'll hit OK. Let me hit OK. All right, now let's cross our fingers. We'll select this, create roof, and there we go. Okay, so now it's working. So remember I was saying that sometimes the geometry is too thin or too complex, that the geometry begins to run into itself when Revit begins to generate that geometry. And we have to admit, I mean, this is a pretty complex, geometrically complex shape. So we could definitely see why Revit is having a hard time with that. So you would also have to go, we start off with going really thin, 2 inches. And then what I'll end up actually doing is I'll undo. So I'll hit Control Z, and I'm going to go back into Edit Type, and I'm not going to actually rename it because I just want to see what the limit is. So I'll hit OK. I'll change this to 3 inches. I'll hit Apply and OK. I'll click on the surface, and let's try it again to see if it works at 3 inches. And it doesn't. Oh, that's really odd. I had tried this. I had played around with the same shape a little while ago, and I had no problems with it even at 8 inches. So, of course, when I'm giving presentations, that's when the problems arise, which is fine. So that means that the thickness of this can only be 2 inches. Now, you might think, well, that's, Javier, who's ever going to do a roof that's 2 inches thick? Actually, complex curved roofs like this are typically going to be made out of concrete. So you do concrete form, and 2 inches for something this complex is actually kind of common. So we're going to go ahead here. Let's start over now that we know that we have to go with 2 inches. So we'll go to roof by face. We already have our generic 2 inch. And I'm going to select Create Roof. We can in the future add a material so that it's, a concrete 2 inch, but we talk about materials in the future as well. So I'll hit Create Roof. I'm sorry, I have to select the surface, then Create Roof. And there we have it. Okay. There's my really odd shaped roof. Okay. Now, this kind of camouflage effect that's going on here is because we have the actual roof surface, okay, or the actual roof itself. Plus, we still have that gray surface, our face, over that material as well. So I'm going to go over to Masking in Sight and then turn off Show Mask Form. And that's going to turn off that surface that we had. All right, so there's my roof. You might say, well, Javier, that looks cool and all, but what about the walls? Well, if you guys remember our lecture on roofs, we had that really cool, great tool when we select a wall and using attach top base. Now, a quick way of selecting all of the walls is by just hovering over one wall and hitting the tab key on the keyboard. And you'll notice that that's going to select all of my walls. So I don't click, it's not a click. I just move the cursor over the wall, and then hit the tab key, and then I'll click. So then I'm going to select all of my walls. I'm then going to select attach top base and select my roof. And there we go. Now that's pretty clean. And these walls are attached to the roof or follow the profile of the roof itself. Okay. So I wanted to start off with this one, with this roof here, simply because it's a roof that I get asked about quite often, is how do you do, a really cool curvy looking roof, right? And that's the easiest way. There are other ways, and there's a lot of different ways of using the in-place massing tools. And as we continue to work in this realm, you begin to become more and more familiar with these tools. Right? So the next one that I want to do is using a roof by extrusion. Okay, so we covered this roof. I'm now going to do roof by extrusion. So let's go to my roof plan here. And I'm going to, actually, let's go to first floor. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing, create my walls, have them go up to roof level, use the rectangle. I'm going to build this one somewhere up here. Okay, it'd be something like that. I'll go to my roof plan, and there's my actual, there's the walls below. And again, I'm getting these walls down below because in the properties tabs, I have the underlay to show the first floor. Okay. Now, roof by extrusion means that we're going to draw a profile, draw a shape, and Revit is simply going to extrude that shape. Okay. Now, in order to set a work, or in order to draw this profile, the shape, we have to set a work plane, or we have to set a plane. Okay. Now, the way we set a plane here was we just we set the plane and we set it to the roof plan, because the roof plan was already a pre-built or pre-assigned plane, right? When we click our levels, we have first floor, second floor, and roof levels, and those levels are already predefined, and we could use them as planes. In this case, though, we're going to be working in an elevation view, and an elevation view doesn't actually have a set plane the way that plan views do. So we actually have to create a plane for ourselves. The way we're going to do that is by clicking on reference plane. Okay, we're still in the architecture tab. We go all the way to the right, and I'm going to click reference plane. Yeah. And at this point, it's pretty much wherever we want it to be, wherever we want to draw the profile onto. I like to go, if I'm going to go on the east elevation, okay, and you can do this from any elevation. Okay, you can do this extrusion from the north, the east, the south, or the west. I do recommend that if you're going to have an extrusion going up and down, then you use either the north or the south elevations, and therefore your reference planes would probably be going north or south. If your extrusion is going east to west, then use either the east or the west planes. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just click here and come down. Now we get to name these reference planes if you want to. You don't have to, but we do have the option. So I'm going to go ahead and click right here where it says click to name. And I'm going to name this roof extrusion. Okay, and I'm going to click outside here. So here's my reference plane. Again, I can move it wherever I want to. It's not a problem. Okay, now I'm going to go to my east elevation. And I'm probably not going to see anything. So there's that cool roof that I did. But where's the where are the walls? Well, let's go back to our roof plan. So these are the elevation markers. I'm not quite sure. I believe I've talked about them. But in case I haven't, just a refresher. These are the elevation markers. If I click on the triangle portion, that is going to bring up the elevation line. And so when I go to my east elevation, okay, right now I just simply double clicked on the triangle, but it's the same thing as coming over here to my project browser and double clicking. When I come to my east elevation, I'm not seeing my walls, right? That has to do with the fact that, let's go back to roof plan. When I click on the triangle portion, this line is where the east elevation is taken from. When I click on this, this is where the north elevation is taken from. This is where the west elevation is taken from, and so on and so on. So if I'm clicking here, or if I select this and the east elevation marker line is here, then that means it's only going to show everything that is in my model from this line moving this way. So what I really want to do is I can take the blue line if I wanted to and actually just bring it back. Or I can just take the entire elevation, do a cross window, click and drag. I'm not even using the move tool. It's just a click and drag. And now when I click on the triangle portion, it tells me that the elevation marker is at this line or at this point here. So now when I go to my east elevation, there we go. Now I see it. Okay, so roof by extrusion. I'm in the architecture tab. I'm going to go to roof, click on the pull down, and I'm going to select roof by extrusion. And this is where it's going to ask me to pick a work plane. Okay, so I'm going to click on this pull down, and there is the work plane that I created, roof extrusion. I'll click right there and I'm going to hit OK. And I'm just going to hit OK. And now I can go ahead and maybe I'll use the spline tool and maybe I'll create some shape. Let's go like this. And I could also just do a straight line or an angled line if I wanted to, maybe do something more drastic, something like that. And right now that we have the lines, we could always select them and maybe adjust them if we wanted to. Maybe I bring this to kind of smooth this out a bit more. Maybe we have something that looks like this. Maybe take this and bring this down a little bit more, right? And now I could say, okay, that's going to be the shape of my roof. Okay, so it's a mixture of my draw tools. At this point, I'll go ahead and hit the check mark. Oops, I'm still on my roof, my 2 inch. So let's click on this pull down. This one can be a bit thicker. So let's go 12 inches. And there's my roof. Let's go see what that looks like. There it is. Okay. Now that extruded a lot farther than what I wanted it to. So I could click on this triangle and just bring it out this way. I could click on this triangle and bring it out this way. Let's go to a roof plan though, because here I can actually play around a bit more from a top view. Okay. Now the extrusion is only going to work in the direction that it is extruded from, meaning notice that I could extrude this from left to right, and that's because I drew this along my east elevation, right? I do not have the options to extend this farther out this way or this way, essentially this way or this way, okay? And that has to do with the fact that that's just how I drew my profile, okay? We can, though, click on Edit Profile, and that's something we weren't able to do in the in-place massing, right? Remember I mentioned that the in-place massing, when you're creating it, you have to make sure that you are happy with it, because once you actually finish the in-place massing and then you want to go back and make a change to it, when it comes to the roofs, it doesn't really like to do that. So you're gonna have to create that. You're gonna have to recreate what you had already created in the in-place massing. In this roof extrusion, this is a bit different. I can actually click and edit the roof extrusion and manipulate the profile. So if I wanted to, I can go ahead and bring this farther out. And I can take this and bring this out a bit more. And hit the check mark, and there we go. Okay, let's go to the roof plan. We'll go to 3D view. And we could say, there's my roof. And we could do the same thing. I could hit the tab key, move the cursor over, hit the tab key, select all my walls, attach top base. And there we go. Okay. The other thing, let's undo this. The other thing I can do, let's go to my roof plan, is I could take this and I could use the rotate tool. And I can rotate this, say 30 degrees. And I could extrude this way and this way. Okay. And so now I have a roof that's at an angle. And that could be cool, but I might want to chop this off on the edges. So if I want to manipulate this roof, if I want to cut it up, I can click on vertical. Okay, so vertical opening. Now this technically is meant to create openings inside of a roof. And what I'm trying to do is essentially I'm trying to cut off edges of the roof, right? So it doesn't really work, or it's not really meant to do this, but we can still use it to edit the roof. So I click on vertical. And I'm going to now create, sorry, I had to click on the roof. Let me do that again. Click on vertical, and then click on the actual roof you want to manipulate or edit. And then I'm going to use the rectangle tool, and I'm going to say, go from this corner to this corner, something like that. And I say, okay, that's the portion of the roof that I want to keep. And now what I want to do is do a larger rectangle around the entire roof. Okay. And so what's going to happen is that it's going to actually erase everything of my, all of my roof that is along these edges, okay, or along this area. I'll hit the check mark. When creating an opening, you cannot select sketch loops within other loops. Yes, you can. Let's hit continue. It might be because of this error right there. Let's bring this up a little bit. Bring this up a little bit. Let's try that. And of course, you know what? I've tried this. Let's go ahead and get out of this. Let's try to, let's bring this. Since I'm going to edit it, I want to actually be able to have more options here. I have done these several times. I even practiced this before the lecture just to make sure that I could work out any kinks. Had no problems then, and now it seems like I'm having all the problems. So let's go ahead and I'm not gonna click on the edge. Let's bring this around there. And this time I'm going to just kind of do something a bit more funkier like that. You're creating an opening, you cannot, yes, you can. Okay, hold on. Okay, so let's start over again. We'll go to vertical, click on the, you know what, let's do this. Let's click on the roof. Oh, I think I have a suspicion. Here's the problem. Okay, so I already know what the problem is. In the architecture tab, we have opening and we have this vertical. And this vertical creates openings through a roof or floor or a ceiling, which is different. It's very similar, but it is different than if we were to select the roof first and then select this vertical, right? Because this means that we're editing this roof by extrusion, whereas this means that we are editing something that's already pre-built, and it typically refers to some of the more generic objects, okay? So let's go ahead and click on this roof. We'll click vertical, cross our fingers that it works this time. I'm going to use the rectangle tool. Obviously, if I had more time and if I was actually designing this, I might make this extrusion a little bit longer so that I could have longer overhangs on either side. Maybe we could bring this down just a little bit. Okay, and now I'll do a larger rectangle. Let's cross our fingers. It should work. Hit the check mark. There we go. Okay, so now that deleted that. Let's go to the 3D view, and there's our building. Now let's go ahead and hit the tab key, attach top base, and there we go. That's kind of interesting. All right, so this is a roof by extrusion, and then we simply rotated the extrusion, and that gives us a really interesting kind of roof shape. Okay, let's move on to the final and the last of the different ways of creating roofs, or the different types of roofs. This is also going to be using the in-place mass, but this one's going to be more of an angular type of roof. So let's go back to first floor. And I'm going to select my walls. Okay, we'll use the rectangle tool. Let's go make sure that our roof goes up to level our walls go up to level roof, rectangle, and now I'm going to create this one somewhere down here. Okay, something like that. Let's go to 3D view. Perfect. You know what? Actually, it's too close to this. So let's hit the tab key, and I'm just going to move this farther down and out this way. Now that probably means that I'm going to have to move this elevation marker out this way too. This way, if I need to go to the east elevation, it's going to be shown. This portion of my building is going to be shown because that's where the elevation line is. Okay, let's go to 3D view. And let's orbit. Okay. By the way, a little trick when orbiting. Okay, notice that it's kind of, if I want to orbit around, if I'm trying to orbit around to say the other side of this wall, I orbit around and it becomes really difficult to kind of orbit, right? Meaning because I'm kind of doing an orbit around everything. A little trick with the orbit tool is if there's something you want to actually orbit around, you simply select it. And now I can actually orbit around that one object. Okay, it makes orbiting a bit easier. But then it becomes problematic if I'm trying to orbit something over here. Okay, so then at that point, then I'd have to select an object over there, and now I'm orbiting around that one object. So let's go ahead and bring this back so we can orbit around this. Okay, so now what I want to do is go back to my in-place mass. There's my warning again saying, hey, you need to show the mass. So I'll just hit close. And we're going to call this roof 2. I'm going to select OK. Now this one's going to be a little bit more complicated in the way that we go about it. What I want to do first, so if this is my first and second floor, right? My roof is going to go higher up. It's going to go above this, okay? And what I'm going to be doing is drawing the different planes of my roof. But in order to do that, I need to have kind of a reference box. So what I'm going to do is actually go to my roof plan, come down here, and I'm going to set my roof plane or set my drawing plane up to level roof. And I'm just going to draw a rectangle. I'm going to go from this corner. Oops, sorry. I want to use reference. I want to use my reference lines. Okay, do a rectangle, go from this corner to this corner. We'll go back to 3D view, and then I'm going to go ahead and select these lines. I just click on it once, create form, solid form. Again, I use the reference line, don't use the model line. Solid form, and it's going to ask me, do we want a cube or just a flat surface? In this case, I actually want a cube. So I want a height to it. Okay, now I don't want it that high, so I could bring this down, or I could specify this and say, you know what, maybe I'll make this 8 feet. It's kind of, maybe we want to go 10. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to start to draw out the planes of my roof. So I'll hit reference, use the line. Now, when we do this, we're actually going to be modeling in 3D, which I believe I've told you guys in the past, you don't do, right? You typically don't, or you want to avoid modeling things in 3D. But because we're going to be doing kind of this customized roof, we really need to see it in 3D view. So in order to do that, we want to make sure that 3D snapping is available, is selected. And instead of drawing on a work plane, because right now we have it set to draw on the roof plane. So anything we draw is going to be flat on the actual roof level. What we want to do is to be able to draw on the faces. So if I want to draw on this face or that face, I have the ability to do so. Okay, so now we are fully working and drawing in 3D. And so I'm going to click on this corner, and instead of go right down the middle, let's do something really funky, because that's what this lecture, because all the other roofs that we've done so far are really funky. So let's go ahead and click there, and to that point. Okay. And then maybe let me hit the escape key so that I finish that edge. I'm going to go ahead and click from here. Instead of going straight, let's go to an angle. And then from there, I'll come to this corner. I'll hit the escape key to finish that edge or that line. And go from there. I'm going to draw that out. I also have to draw a line here. And I'm going to draw a line from there to there. The escape key. Now, I didn't draw a straight line from here to there, or the same thing from there to there. So I did draw a line from here to here and there to there, because what I'm going to want is this surface and this as a surface. Okay. However, right now I just drew lines. These are all just reference lines. So at this point, I no longer need this cube. So I'm going to hit the tab key, select it, and delete. Okay. So again, the way I did that, hover over it with the cursor, hit the tab key on the keyboard. That's going to select all of the surfaces, click, and then hit the delete key. Okay. Now at this point, if I wanted to, I could select any of these points and maybe bring this part up, maybe bring it out a bit. Okay. Maybe do the same thing over here. Bring this out just a little bit. Okay. Now we're talking about a real funky roof. So right now we just have the lines. Let's go ahead and create some surfaces. So I'll go ahead and click on this reference line, hold down the control key so I could select these 4 lines. Okay. And I'm going to click on this pull down and solid form. And it's going to ask me, do I just want a surface or an extrusion? And I just want the surface, the flat one. Let's do that one more time on this side now. Click here, there, and there. Did I click? I'm not sure if I clicked that. I may have accidentally clicked the surface. So let's start here. Click, click, click. Okay. Again, the last time that I clicked, I accidentally selected the surface. So make sure you don't make that same mistake. Every line that you select should have these kind of 4 planes associated to each line. I'm going to go ahead and click on the pull down, solid form, and I want just a surface. Okay. And now there's my roof. Okay. Kind of a parabolic, it's an odd parabolic roof, but we can go ahead and if we wanted to, perhaps we wanted an overhang on this side. We could also always use our temporary dimensions, say we want to bring that out 4 feet. By doing that, it allows us to bring this out exactly and specify 4 feet. And we can do the same thing over here. Bring this out. Oops. Again, do that, Control Z. Let's go all the way back, Control Z. So click, bring this out. I have to zoom in to make sure I click on the correct temporary dimension, 4 feet. And then do the same thing with this point. Bring this out, zoom in, make sure we're clicking on the correct temporary dimension. This temporary dimension is probably referencing to the center of the wall or something. So this goes 4 feet. Okay. And again, if you wanted to maybe adjust this even lower, we can adjust all of these points. And then that's it. From here, it's the same as this. We're going to go ahead and finish our mass. Let's cancel. Again, we get that warning. We're just going to go ahead and ignore that. Hopefully this time we don't have to use a 2-inch roof. So let's go back. We're going to go roof by face. Let's start off with a 8-inch. I'm going to select this. And we have to do this. We have to do it individually. You could try doing it together at the same time, but it usually doesn't. Yes, you see, it usually doesn't do it at the same time. So we have to do this face individually. So we'll create this one. There we go. Okay. There, so here's an 8-inch. If we wanted to, let's select both. Select this and select this. Let's see if we can get a 12-inch. Oh, so it does. It will just do a 12-inch roof. Okay. Again, we get the camouflage. That's because we could still see the surfaces, right? So in that case, we have to go back to massing in sight and just turn off the surfaces. And there's this funky looking roof. We can hover over the walls, hit the tab key on the keyboard, select all of the walls, and then attach top base to this side. I'll hit OK, and then attach top base to this side, and just hit OK. And there we go. Now we have some, like I said, it's like a curvy, parabolic, flat roof. Okay. So you have, these are 3 options, 3 different ways of creating these really odd shaped roofs, but it really, using these 3 kind of options, you really have a lot of play, a lot of possibilities to work with. Okay. So from here, we're not done yet. We're almost done. The one tricky part, or the one problematic aspect to these roofs is going to be when we try to add ceiling lights. So I want to go ahead and address that at this point, since we're talking about these really kind of odd roofs. And I think the one that's the most challenging out of all 3 of these is, how do you add a ceiling light into this guy? And actually, now that I think about it, because it is a 2-inch thick roof, we might not be, and well, yeah, we can't do recessed lights, but we could do maybe a pendant light or something like that hanging off of these guys. So let's go ahead and stick with this roof. By the way, depending on how I feel about it, again, this is a 2-inch thick roof, and you can make a 2-inch thick roof out of concrete. Look at an architect named Felix Candela, does these really amazing structures, or did these amazing structures. I think he passed away already. These concrete concrete roofs that look just like the ones that we've modeled here, and it's using really thin concrete. Anyways, depending on how I feel about having a 2-inch thick concrete, I might go back and remodel this. Like I said, right before this lecture, I actually created the same looking structure. I must have overdone it somehow, maybe going on the outsides here, but I was able to create that same roof using a thicker roof structure, right? So it's just a matter of playing with it. Unfortunately, it's kind of a trial and error process that you're going to have to go through. But let's go ahead and stick with this 2-inch roof, and let's add some lights. Now, I said I'm going to do a pendant light, but if you want to do recessed cans, whichever light you want to use, it's all going to be, the same process. I'm just saying a pendant light because if we use recessed can lights, there is no roof for the light to be recessed into. So in other words, the light's going to be sticking out above the roof because the roof is so thin. So that's where we're going to go ahead and just use a pendant light, which is going to hang. Okay, so let's explain. Let's take a look at and see what exactly is the problem here. Okay, why is Javier talking about these complex? Why is it so difficult to do lights on these roofs or add lights on these roofs? So let's go to the second floor reflective ceiling plan. Okay, so this is what we see. Let's actually go to an elevation view first. Okay, so here's my elevation view. Remember that reflective ceiling plans are taken typically about 7'6" above our second floor. So it's somewhere around here, and it's looking up. Okay. However, the default settings is is set up so that it is only looking up from 7 feet 6 up to the roof level. In other words, we could only see within this area. We cannot see anything above this. Okay. So that's problem number one. Problem number two, if we went ahead and just went and tried to add a light fixture. So let's go to component. Oh, perfect, pendant light. We get the little symbol saying, nope, we can't do any of that, right? It's not allowing me to. The problem with that is that the problem with lights is that they have to be attached to a ceiling surface. Okay, so we need to actually add a ceiling onto this in order for a light to be able to be placed. In order for a light to be placed on our reflective ceiling plan, we need to place it on an actual ceiling. Now, obviously, we're not going to want to go through this whole process, create this really intricate roof, only to have a flat roof on the inside, right? Because our options when we create a ceiling doesn't really give us an option to do, a really curvy roof. We pretty much only get the option of, oops, let's cut a section. We really only get the option of having this kind of flat looking roof, which who wants that? There we go. Maybe you can see that a bit better. All right. Nobody wants a flat ceiling when you already have this really beautiful underside of the roof there. So what do we do? So let me go ahead and delete this roof. So the first thing that I want to do is adjust the view range. Now, I think a few of you guys, or a couple of you guys, had problems with the view range in the two-story residence project. Okay, so let me go ahead and go over that. So if I'm in the properties box, in the properties tab, I'm not in the middle of a command. So remember, the properties change if you're in the middle of a command here. So make sure you hit the escape key a couple times to make sure you get your out. And then we're going to go ahead and come about halfway down. Under the extents tab, we have view range. So I'm going to click edit. Now, the trick to understanding what view range is actually to click this little button on the bottom left that says show. And it gives you a really nice little graphic that you could follow. So that it says, or so that we understand, what exactly it is that we're changing and what's what. So essentially, what is the cut plane? Because we have to deal with the cut plane. So the cut plane is taken at 7.6, right? That's where the plane is. Range top, range bottom, range top, range bottom. So this is what we can essentially kind of see. And then we have the view depth, which is number 7. Sorry, view depth, which is number 6, right? So how far past do you want to see past the level itself? So this is a good little kind of infographic to study and to understand, because view ranges tend to be a bit helpful when we're trying to understand things that are outside of the level. So if I'm trying to draw something on the roof plan level, but I also need to see something that's on the first floor. We talked about the underlay, but we could also adjust the view range, okay? So here what I want to do is I want to actually be able to see everything. Notice how part of my building is cut off, and that's because that's at 7.6 feet, okay? That's where the cut plane is. Oh, we might not be able to do anything about that. Regardless, let's go into unlimited, and we're going to change the view depth. Typically what you have as top, whatever you have here set as top, you should also have here set as your view depth. So we're going to hit apply and okay. Yeah, that didn't really change much. It's okay. Notice how my roof is cutting off here at these corners. That's because the roof, that's happening over here. Remember that we are cutting the building 7.6 feet above this level here, level line. So if we want to be able to see that corner, we're going to go back to the view range. And that means that we're going to have to lower the cut plate line. So maybe we'll go down to 5.6. Let it apply. There we go. That's good enough. Yeah, there we go. That's good enough. Okay. So let's change. Let's go into shaded. Fine. I don't like the shaded. I don't like the shiny. So let's go consistent colors. Okay. So now we're looking at the underside of the roof. Unfortunately, we can't see, there is no kind of depth there. We can't see the curvature of this roof, okay? So what I can do now, okay, we talked about trying to add a ceiling light and it doesn't let us. We need an actual ceiling. So what I can do though, is I could add a ceiling. Instead of doing automatic ceiling, I'm going to do a sketch ceiling. And I'm going to use the rectangle tool. Actually, I skipped a step, sorry. Let me go back. What I'm going to do, what you have to do is set a series of these, you have to set a series of these section lines wherever you are going to want your lights to be placed, okay? Because we're going to want to be able to see them in section. Now, the one downside to this is that if I wanted to equally space my section lines, I can't. So if I was to do another one over here, so this is assuming or saying that I'm going to have a row of, say, pendant lights, okay, right along here. Or if you don't, it doesn't even have to be a row. Just wherever you're going to want to add a light, you're going to want to use the section marker first, okay? Because we're going to have to go into the section view to manipulate this. Because again, Revit does not allow us to add a light directly to the bottom of a roof. So what we're trying to do here is essentially manipulate the program to let it do what it is that we want it to do. If you wanted to equally space these, unfortunately, we can't, right? There's no temporary dimensions that pop up here. We also can't dimension to a section line. So what we can do is we could use our detail line. So if we go to annotate detail line, I can just use a line and maybe I'll draw one line from the inside there going straight up. And then I'll draw another one. Oops, I do want them to be straight. Straight, and then another one straight, and another one straight. And then by doing that, I now have the temporary dimension. So I can select this, adjust this guy right there and say, you know what, this really wants to be 8 feet. And now I can use my align tool, AL, click on this line, click on the section, there we go. And now I can select this and say, this also wants to be 8 feet. Use the align tool, oops, and so on. Okay. I'm not going to do all of these sections. Once I'm done, I'm going to go ahead and just do a cross window and then deselect my section markers so that I know that I'm selecting the detail lines, and I'll hit the delete key. Okay, so again, that's only if you want to specify how far away you're going to want these lights from a particular, from a wall. So if I want to make sure that that this light is 8 feet away, then we're going to go ahead and place it. You could use these detail lines. There's a lot of other ways of going about it as well. You can model out the light first and then move it afterwards. It really depends on the type of light and how you're going to be adding the lights, right? Anyways, let's move on. We're going to go into the architecture tab, ceiling, and I'm going to create a sketch ceiling. I'm going to use a rectangle. Okay. Now the type of ceiling that I use is kind of irrelevant because by the time we're done with this, we're going to hide this ceiling. And the height off of the floor is also irrelevant because we're going to be moving it. So what I'm going to do is just create a small rectangle for a ceiling. And then I'm going to hit the check mark and say I'm done. And there we go. we have we have a small little ceiling. If I go into the section marker, into the section, there's the little ceiling that I just added. Okay. So next, now that I have a ceiling, now I could go into component, and now I could add my pendant light. There we go. Okay. And now I can go ahead and highlight, do a cross window around this. Notice that the cross window that I did was from left to right. So I click, drag, and move the cursor over it, which is different than going from this side over here, because then this is also going to select the section marker. Okay, so again, whenever, let's go over here. Whenever we do a cross window, click and drag, and we see the solid lines, then that means that we're going to be selecting everything that is within this box. When we go from right to left and we get the dashed lines, then it means that it's going to select everything that is within the box and everything that the box and the lines of the box are touching, right? So that's why if I go from left to right, it's everything within the box, every entire object that's within the box. Section marker is not selected there. If I go the other way around, section line is selected, right? So because it's touching the line, it's touching my dashed line, right? Okay, so I'm going to do a left to right selection box, and I'm going to use the copy tool. And I'm just going to, actually, yes, I want to make sure that multiple is selected. I'm going to want to do this several times. I'm going to go ahead and click, and I could say, you know what, this wants to be every, say, 10 feet, 10, enter. Now, because I hit multiple, it means that it's automatically going to want to start. It's automatically going to set me up to copy again and again and again, right? So I can move this up, type in 10. Now, instead of having to move the cursor up every single time, what I actually like to do when I'm going to do copy something in a row, I'll move the object really far out. And now all I have to do is hit 10, enter, 10, enter, 10, enter, 10, enter, and so on, right? Obviously, I did one too many. So let's go ahead, take this out. Now that's probably way too close to the wall. I could leave it, but I'm just going to do a cross window and just move these down just a little bit. Click and drag, something like that. Okay. So now we have these pendant lights on these floating little ceilings. So now let's go into the section. Okay. And now what I could do is I could select this section. Sorry, select the ceiling. I'm not selecting the light because when we use the move tool on a light, it doesn't allow us to go up and down. It just allows us to go left to right. However, the ceiling, the light is attached to the ceiling. So if I select the ceiling and I move this, I could actually move this up. I could also use the up and down arrow keys on my keyboard to kind of move it into place, right? Now, obviously, it's not going to be exact because we can't rotate the light to fit the curvature of the ceiling, but we can get it pretty close, right? So that it'll look something like that. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm just going to click. I actually don't even have to use the move tool. I could just click and drag, and I could just nudge it using the up arrow key there. Do the same thing over here. Click and drag. Let's maybe bring that down. Yeah, right there. Do the same thing over here. Click, drag. I'll bring this down. Bring it up a little bit, hitting the up arrow key on the keyboard. Click, click and drag, and place it right there. Okay, so now I have my ceiling lights. Okay. Now the problem with this, obviously, let's go to the reflective ceiling plan, is that now we have these little kind of weird ceilings that really shouldn't be there. We see them in the reflective ceiling plan, we see them in the section views, and so on. So what I can do, though, is we could select just one of the ceilings and hide it. Right-click, hide in view. And this is a situation where I would actually hide in view category. And that's going to hide all of my ceilings. There we go. Okay. Now, I would recommend that you add all of your ceiling lights and you go through this process before actually hiding all of your ceiling lights, right? Because once you hide them, if I was to go in and try to create a new ceiling and go through the same process, oops, let's use a rectangle. Hit the check mark. I don't see it. And I don't see it because we had told Revit to hide all of my ceilings. Okay. If you ever hide something and you need to bring it back, you simply click on this little light bulb down here at the bottom, which is the blue light bulb that reveal hidden elements. And we can select an object, right click and unhide category. And there we go. Now it brings all my ceilings back up. Okay. But in this case, I'm going to want to right click, hide in view category. Now, the one downside to this kind of approach is that we just hid the ceiling, but it only hides those little ceilings in the second floor view. If or when I go to section view, they're still there. So that just means I'm going to have to do the same thing in the section view, right click, hide in view category. And that also means that if I was to, and we'll talk about views in the future. But if I was to do a camera view, looking inside the space, then my perspective view is also going to show, it's also going to show the ceilings. So in this view, we could also do the same thing. Select, right click, hide in view category. Okay. And there we have it. Let's go to the 3D view. The same thing in the 3D view, actually. So we'll have to select this, right click, hide in view category. Okay. But now I have these pendant lights hanging off of this really organic formed roof structure, right? And the same process would do the same thing on these roofs as well. Okay. So that's it. Again, the assignment is to create 3 different roofs using these processes, but they do not have to look exactly the same as mine or relatively the same as mine. As long as you give me one curvy roof using the in-place model, you give me one roof extrusion, and you give me one in-place model kind of angular roof, then that's sufficient. And you can do it all in one model, the same way that I have it here, save it, and then just submit the Revit file. Okay, so that'll be the assignment. And then that's it. That's all I'm covering in this lecture. I did want to take a minute and just kind of reinforce or just kind of explain that from here on out, from now until the end of the semester, I am holding kind of I don't call it an office hours, but I am holding, I guess we'll call it office hours specifically for ARC31, specifically for Revit. And that is held every Wednesday, starting at 5 p.m. and I'm available for 1 hour. It's not mandatory that you show up. It just means I'll be there. If you guys have any questions, you guys could pop in, ask the questions, and then leave, right? You could also just come on by, stop by, and listen into what other students have. I typically stick around for at least the first 30 minutes. So from 5 to 5:30, I'll definitely be there. If no one shows up, then by 5:30, I'll go ahead and log out myself. But if people show up, and I'll stay until however long people are there. Okay. The way you access this is through the Confirm Now on Canvas. On the left tab, there's a Confirm Now, and you'll actually see a button that will let you know, that will give you access to the live sessions. But again, these sessions, which are held every Wednesdays from 5 to 6, are not mandatory. You're not graded if you show up. You're not giving any additional or extra points for showing up. It is simply there as a resource to you. If you have any questions, then you could use that. You can meet me there at that time to ask your questions. All right. Other than that, thanks a lot, guys. And feel free to send me an email if you have questions, and also book an appointment during my office hours. All right. Take care.